Any man who comes into a high secure prison with an accusation of a sex offence against them is inevitably going to encounter a whole range of difficulties.
Just over a month ago, the Met Police swooped into the Ecuadorian embassy behind me, and 6 officers carried a reluctant Assange out after nearly 7 years inside. The whistleblower was whisked away to London's notorious Belmarsh prison, where he remains locked up next to some of Britain's most infamous inmates. To find out more about Britain's prison systems and how Assange is likely to be treated inside, I'm joined by Pepsi Watson, who spent more than 13 years inside Britain's prisons.
What I would say to that question is prisons in England have always been these kind of dark, hidden away places, hidden away from the public, where bad things happen, deaths, suicides, abuse, and that can be covered up and has been covered up over the past decades and over the past years gone by. So I would say that it hasn't been blown up. Belmarsh is a high secure prison which holds dangerous men and which has had notorious previous inmates, people like Lee Rigby's killers, Ian Huntley, Ronnie Biggs, the great train robber, Charles Bronson, England's longest serving prisoner, and they're bad men and they're dangerous men. When one of Lee Rigby's killers came here, he was in an altercation with prison officers which resulted in his teeth being knocked out. So bad things do happen in HMP Belmarsh, yeah. High-profile prisoners in English prisons have an aura about them. They carry with them into the prison landings an aura where everybody's talking about them on the landing, the prison officers are talking about them, the prison officers are going home to their wives and partners and talking about them. I was in prison in HMP Norwich many years ago with Tony Martin, who had been convicted of murder, which got later reduced to manslaughter on appeal, which was a very high-profile case where he'd shot a repeat burglar and killed him with a shotgun after his farm had been burgled and robbed on numerous occasions. There was a massive public outcry. So he was a high-profile prisoner. He was very quiet. Tony Martin was actually left alone by other prisoners, and he was quite respected because a lot of people agreed that what he did was arguably justified, so he was kind of left alone. But yeah, Julian Assange in HMP Belmarsh, he's extremely high profile. He will have a massive aura about him within HMP Belmarsh. People will just want to get a look at him through the gate, or he'll be spoken about. News about him will spread like wildfire around the prison. He'll be on the news, people will be watching him on the news, but at the same time, HMP Belmarsh, like I previously mentioned, has got a record for housing and detaining some of Britain's most notorious prisoners, so the prison officers here will be well equipped to deal with someone of the stature of Julian Assange. Oh, potentially, absolutely, yes. Any man who comes into a high secure prison in England with an accusation of a sex offence against them is inevitably going to encounter a whole range of difficulties. The prison mentality, the pack mentality, the kind of prison, land in unofficial laws and rules kind of dictate that anybody who comes in for an alleged sex offence, even if they haven't been found guilty, will be facing abuse, potential attacks. I would say that because of how high profile Assange is, I would expect him to be housed on the HSU here, which is the high secure unit, where he won't have too much interaction with other prisoners. I think other prisoners who are savvy and well educated on current affairs and politics and such like, it potentially won't be too much of a big deal, because those kind of prisoners perhaps could maybe read between the lines as to the background of this, potentially trumped up rape charge. But other kind of prisoners who are maybe younger, got something to prove, could potentially target Assange for having a rape charge. I would say that due to the super incredible high profile of Julian Assange, his privacy has been limited for the past 7 years while he's been in the embassy, and that privacy, he's not going to get much more here. In this prison at HMP Belmarsh, Assange will be detained under long periods of lockup. In most prisons around the UK, in England and Wales at the moment, prisoners are lucky to get 30 minutes of fresh air out of their cell a day. Belmarsh, with high-profile prisoners, is notorious for keeping them locked up for long periods of time. Might come out of his cell for maybe an hour a day. Due to his high-profile nature, it's highly probable, in my opinion, that he will be monitored closer than normal. All his phone calls will be listened to. He will only get 10-minute phone calls. He'll be lucky to get one phone call a day. That will be monitored every day. Every single one of his incoming and outgoing letters will be very closely monitored and read by the security department here. He will be observed on visits. His visits list and visitors who come to apply to visit him will be thoroughly checked out. So he'll have the privacy in his own cell, in his prison cell, but in these Category A high security prisons like Belmarsh, the prison officers here and the security departments have got the resources to bug Assange's cell if they feel that they need to do that. In my opinion, I think that is likely. Prison officers will also be instructed to keep an eye on Assange, who he's talking to on the landing, and they will be making sure that he's monitored very closely. And it's also my opinion that the American government will be pressuring the British establishment for regular and up-to-date and consistent weekly, even daily intel on Julian Assange. Prolonged periods of isolation in solitary confinement has a catastrophic impact on a person's mental functioning. Despite the obvious differences between animals and humans, tests have proven on animals that when you put them in a cage together, then they will go crazy, lose their mind, and start to attack each other. My personal experience, I have been detained in 13 different segregation units in young offenders institutions and prisons all over England, and prolonged isolation for me, specifically in Aylesbury Young Offenders Segregation Unit, where I was kind of in and out of the segregation unit for long periods of time for 13 months. I lost my mind, I became skinny, I became extremely paranoid. I would forget what my own voice sounds like, so I would talk to myself because I'd forgotten what my own voice sounds like. Your ability to function and have healthy relationships on an interpersonal level is completely decimated because you just live in your mind, you become attached to your mind, and you're starved of human interaction, so you kind of die inside. You kind of die inside, you know, and it's very difficult in isolation to maintain good mental health because there's nothing to do other than think, and you lose your mind. And you see in prisons in America where they're kept in solitary confinement for years, and they start hallucinating, seeing insects on the wall, gouging chunks out of their faces, enduring catastrophic destruction in mental functioning. With Julian Assange, it's likely that he could end up in isolation. The long periods of bang up, even on the unit that he's in, is arguably isolation if he's only coming out for 30 or 40 minutes a day. When Abu Hamza was in this prison before he was extradited, he was here for 8 years, and his barrister said that the conditions that he was held under in this establishment, HMP Belmarsh, were horrendous. So it's a fact that Assange could remain detained here for years. I know he's serving a sentence at the moment, but that sentence will expire and he won't be released. He'll be detained here and he will go through a long, lengthy process where he's fighting extradition to the United States. So isolation, solitary confinement will be a part of Assange's near future, and he's going to have to find a way to cope with that and hang on to his mental health, and that's going to be a huge challenge for him. No, I don't expect the conditions to improve due to that £50+ million investment from the Ministry of Justice. The £50+ million investment from former Prisons Minister Rory Stewart and current Justice Secretary David Gauke is a classic example of what can only be described as symptom resolution, which we consistently see from successive failing elected British politicians who are absolutely clueless about the criminal justice system. Now, that money is being invested in a number of prisons to prevent drugs coming into the prison in the hope that it will reduce violence. But history shows us that wherever there's a will, there's a way. Prisoners are very clever, very smart, and if they shut down specific avenues to get drugs into the prison, the authorities, then prisoners will just find other ways in a short period of time to get the drugs into the prison. So that money is a waste. Any investment, any significant investment of that kind of monetary figure of 40, 50 million, in my opinion, needs to be invested in updating the dilapidated communications and technology systems in all of the failing prisons in England and Wales, so that the up-to-date and accurate flow of information, positive and negative, about each prisoner between all the multidisciplinary teams and individual professionals working with said prisoner during their time in custody and post-release, and that is how you protect the public, and that is how you ensure that prisoners who remain dangerous remain in custody, and only the prisoners that are safe to be released are released.